Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. And once again, I have Jerry Klingerman. I just want to make sure I always get the names right. Back on the show with me. Now, I asked him to come back because, quite frankly, we weren't finished the first time that we had a conversation because we were destructing and reconstructing his life. And so he was giving me a good backstory to all that has been going on with him and when we kind of moved towards the end of that conversation, he was telling us some awesome things. He's writing a book and he wants to get on stage because he has a message and he has a mission. And so we're going to talk about that today. Jerry, welcome back.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate you having me back. I know we had a great time the first time we chatted, and hopefully have some fun and get some good information out today as well.
So let's go ahead and dive right in. So first, let's cover the title of your book. So let's get it on the table so that our listeners and our watchers know what to expect from you.
My book is titled "Reclaiming Masculinity: How to Be a Man in the 21st Century."
Well, that go on. So what in the world? So that's a lot. And so
Yeah.
there's got to be a backstory to this. And let's try to uncover some of that backstory. So what are you trying to tell people and who are you trying to tell it to?
Sure. Great question. Um, I may have shared with you the last time a little bit of my backstory that, at my age, I was around, I was very young, but I was around for the birth of the modern day feminist movement, which was a good and necessary thing. Women continue to struggle for rights that they should have had all along.
Mhm.
My position is that along the way, uh, there's been a phenomenon where men, and then it trickles down to younger men like millennial age men, Gen Z men, and especially boys, are being treated very differently than the corresponding age group of women and girls. And all my message simply is men are men, women are women, and men should be able to approach life, relationships, everything from the standpoint of their natural masculinity. Now, having said that, people might be tempted to throw certain buzzwords at me, that kind of thing. This is not about being a chest thumping, iron my shirt, stay in the kitchen type guy.
Right.
That's not my message at all. That's not who I am. Just not at all. Um, I just want men to be able to approach life and especially relationships from the standpoint of masculinity and being a man.
So let's can we define it? I think we need to define that if that's going to be our stance. So that's going to be your perspective. Um, because like you said, I think depending on where you go geographically, culturally, religiously, that definition may change. And I say that because I've recently had somebody who's grew up Amish, and there's a very clear, well, not you, but somebody else, very clear definition of what it means to be a man. And then we have a variety of other ideas. So let's be clear. Let's define what masculinity is.
Um, I'll be happy to do that. I'm a little surprised you mentioned the word Amish because I am from the heart of the world's largest Amish and Mennonite settlement. I'm not sure if I shared that with you before or not. Uh,
I don't recall it. And
Okay, okay. Yeah. My family goes back 150 years in the literal heart of Ohio's Amish communities, which are the largest in the world. Because of the media and Hollywood, people think it's Pennsylvania, but it's not.
it's
Within
not
that,
Pennsylvania because that's where I'm from.
no, it's not actually.
Okay.
Actually, the Lancaster area settlements in Ohio go back and forth in terms of the largest population. I always joke that it depends how cold the previous winter was. Um,
I would grant that to be true.
so yeah, but having said that, I have an incredible amount of experience working with Amish people and particularly Amish business owners. I spent 18 years working with people within the furniture industry. I actually, at one time, was the only person in the United States who had my exact job. And I also created and launched what is now the largest Amish lifestyle publication in the country, and have self-published two, soon to be three books about that community.
Wow.
So I definitely hear you that it can be the definition of a man can be different in terms of geography, culture, etc. Um, for purposes, and I'm not going to deny that my observations of that culture haven't influenced me somewhat. I will say this, and then I'll move on. That people tend to make assumptions about how Amish women are treated. They tend to make assumptions about the entire culture based on what the media, and I have a degree in journalism, so,
Mhm.
but based on what the media tells them. It's my experience that most people are woefully uninformed and misinformed
Mhm.
about Amish life. I can say with zero reservation that most Amish people are very happy, content, well-adjusted people.
Well, good,
Um,
good. And
yeah,
that's good
yeah,
to
yeah,
know.
yeah. It is,
Um,
it is, and it's like any subculture. You know, you tend to only hear about the negative things in the news. So anyhow, um, but yeah, for my purposes, what I'm talking about, being a man is just embracing your role as a natural provider, um, being strong yet gentle, just all those kinds of things. But what I'm finding out is, and I think I shared with you in the pre-show portion, um, I've been talking to the men's wives, girlfriends, and mothers. Um, what I'm finding out, and it's definitely my experience as well, is that we men are horrible communicators. Okay, we're terrible at communicating because of how we have been treated, mostly by other men in our lives. It's a generational thing. You've heard the cliches. Big boys don't cry. The one that always gets a smile out of men that I talk to is, quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about, because
yeah,
I,
that's
I
been around for
yeah,
a while.
it's been around for, and it's still around, believe it or not, because when I talk to young men, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard that one. So, but what happens, the way that manifests itself is that we're taught from a very, very young age to suppress our emotions.
Mhm.
Okay. And believe it or not, this might be difficult for some women to believe or accept, but men are very emotional creatures. We're very feeling, we're very emotional. It's just that we're taught to suppress that. And again, how that manifests itself in our relationships is we don't communicate.
Mhm.
So that's becoming the cornerstone of my message to men is let's unlock that. You know, that's masculinity means a lot of different things to different people, but for me, it's like, okay, you're a man, yes, but I know that deep down you also are a thinking and feeling creature. Let's explore that.
So this conversation could really go in a couple of different directions. So I'm going to be really clear and intentional on how I move forward here. What are girlfriends, wives, mothers that you're talking to? What are they saying that they want something specifically out of men or the men in their lives that's different from what they're actually getting now? Is are those kind of are are those kind of conversations you're having?
Absolutely 100%. And it
Okay,
all it all it all comes back to communication. And as I talk to people, I have a number of things that I guess talking points, for lack of a better word. So, when you're talking to somebody that you just met or whatever, and you're giving the quote unquote elevator speech, what do you do? Um, at least three times as I've laid out what my mission is, I have had women, excuse me, of all ages respond with these exact words: yes, please do this.
cool.
And yeah, and I think it all comes back to communication. And I don't know if I shared this example with you before, and forgive me if I did,
Well,
um,
share it.
about my typical male, about 35 years old. At age 35, most guys are secure and or growing in their careers. They're probably in a marriage or a long-term relationship, but there comes a point where they kind of feel things slipping away. And on this, I speak from experience.
Hmm.
They feel their relationship slipping away. They know there's something wrong, but they don't know what to do about it. And at some point, they find themselves with their wife, and she's leaning across the table with tears in her eyes, or sitting on a couch at a therapist's office, and saying to him tearfully, "Why won't you talk to me?" And of course, the answer is he doesn't know how. He truly doesn't know how.
But he doesn't know that. And that's the truth.
Exactly. That's the point, and that's where I'm trying to help. Is like he doesn't know how. It's like, okay, so let's address this. And I think one thing perhaps that our partners don't realize is that we, of course, we are afraid of the rejection that can come with opening up to a woman.
Hmm.
And if that happens, if a guy does get the guts to put something out there to his partner and say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. If that's not accepted, I'm not saying that. Yeah, I'm not saying that she has
Well, it's an
to agree with
for
it.
men, it's an all or nothing kind of thing. If they actually disclose something and it's accepted, then it's all good. If
Right,
it's rejected, it's all bad, and there's no in between.
right. And in terms of acceptance, I would say that she, if she could just accept that he has shared this and this is how he feels, not necessarily that she agrees with him. It could be hey, okay, I understand that. Let's talk about this and move on from there. Instead of like, him feeling like he's been rejected, because if his point is rejected, he feels like his whole perspective has been rejected.
Right.
And I can promise you this. I can promise you this. Um, if that happens, he'll never open up again. It won't happen. It won't happen.
Or it would happen very, very reluctantly, and that's so
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
Yeah,
it would. It
because
would.
demands, and I'm almost as old as you, or as old as you, so I do know our past in terms of culturally here in America, and so I do recognize that it's we don't know how, we don't know how to communicate, because the models for that to occur may not have been there or were not there. So we grow up culturally through movies, television, books that we read to understand what or how a man should communicate, what they communicate, and how they communicate.
Right, exactly. So if you take that concept that you just laid out and pivot it back to the subtitle of my book, how to be a man in the 21st century, it's not about being, the chest thumping kind
Something,
of
yeah.
dude. Yeah.
I know.
I, I kind of, and I'll interject this as well. What I'm doing is it's out there now. It's a movement that's going to grow a lot in the coming years. But what I'm seeing, and I think it's kind of unfortunate, is I think there's an explosion of what I call bro coaches. Okay, guys that they're on stage and they're big long beards, and I can't grow a big long beard, but they're and they're out there yelling and this, that, and the other, and dropping the f-bomb, this is what you got to do, guys. It's like, no, it's like, I'm thrilled that you're trying to get a message out there, but let's fall back from the bombastic positions.
Hmm. So what's the alternative? Tell
Uh,
us,
the alternative, I'll give you an example, and I'll
please.
preface it by saying that at this stage in my life, instead of quoting great literature, I love to quote movies and television. Um, so one of my newest favorite movies actually came out in 2015 is the Robert De Niro film, The Intern. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. It was
Not yet.
probably largely forgettable. Um, the premise is he's a 70-year-old widower who goes back to work at an e-commerce company as an intern. And along the way, he's kind of a button down, briefcase, suit and tie guy. But along the way, as he's working with like Gen Z slash millennial style men, he becomes a de facto mentor to them. And I really took some of the stuff in that movie to heart. And so I guess what I would say is like, I kind of approach it as, I'm the gentleman's men's coach, right?
So my thinking in all of this is there's an expectation or a need for mentoring. I
Yes.
I always in my book and in books that I'm reading, especially regarding leadership, but this would be applicable to just mentoring other, to men's relationships to other men, is to be that mentor and to share wisdom, and in application and in understanding, because we become wiser as we grow older, and especially for those who have maybe have had one or two divorces under our belt. Um, if we continue the cycle, we'll have another divorce under our belt because we're not learning. But if we do choose to learn, we could then share and impart that wisdom to a new, younger generation. Yes?
And that's, you nailed it 100%. That's exactly the perspective from which I'm coming. It's like, yeah, I've been divorced twice. And, you know, you have to step back and say, okay, what went wrong? Why did this happen twice?
Mhm.
So yeah, and hopefully as sentient beings, we can learn from our mistakes and then, lead by example.
I, for one, have been divorced twice as well.
Okay.
So I'm right there with you. So I totally understand. Um, how would I, as an older gentleman, learn from what you are learning from your conversations with women? What are women in terms of communication? It's not just about talking, or it could be. Are they, is there something specific that they're wanting from the man in their lives? And they want it in a certain way?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure I have a good answer for you at this point.
Okay.
It, we've definitely identified the problem in talking with women. What I believe is that in terms of, obviously communication, but I also believe one of the baselines as well is intimacy. And I feel like those are intertwined.
Mhm.
And I'm not necessarily speaking of intimacy as the physical act of intimacy, although that's important.
Right.
Um, and again, that kind of serves as a baseline for other forms of intimacy. It can be as simple as just a glance, a heartfelt look, a glance, a knowing glance between two people who care about each other. It can be just texting your partner in the middle of the day, like I did just a few hours ago, saying, "Hey, it's been 6 hours since I told you I loved you." You know, um, maybe you're making dinner together in the kitchen, which I love to cook, and it just a touch on the sleeve. Um, it, Intimacy flows from that up, and intimacy, I believe, can take many forms. Once you establish it, though, you recognize the different forms that you as a man can express that intimacy to your partner.
That can go in a lot of different directions because we know intimacy has different ways of expressing itself. And so it's verbal, it's physical, it's emotional, it's even cognitive. If you kind of relate to somebody, sharing the things that you're reading, uh, just talking about maybe a TV show that you've watched. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming back and not just leaving something on the table. You watched a movie, oh well and good, but it's like coming back and saying, you know, I really got something out of that. Now, I'm not talking about your typical 90s action film, which is totally void of any substance. But, if the two of you, and your spouse or your partner, or you're watching a TV show or a movie, or, you're both engaged in reading the same book, hopefully, you have then something to talk about. And that can really help get started those conversations that the woman wants to have and probably the man needs to have because they don't typically have a point of reference to have a conversation about something because um, men watch football or play sports or
Right.
are engaged in work. And so their energies, mental, physical, spiritual, are engaged in activities that they feel are important to them. And until they realize that a relationship is also important, they may not engage and give it the amount of energy required.
That's that's an amazing point, Keith. It really truly is. And again, that goes back to my archetypal 35-year-old man who, by the time he realizes like, oh, wait a minute, there's something wrong with my relationship, it could be too late.
Yeah.
It really could. And again, a lot of men, perhaps most men, the majority of men, don't have those tools. Um, and we could go down a real rabbit hole here. I don't know if
Well,
we
we'll have to
want
do
to.
another conversation.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Um, one of the things that I absolutely am going to be talking about in the book is kind of a garbage in, garbage out concept, and that comes back to what a lot of younger men are putting in here.
Yeah.
Of course, we've all got the supercomputers here we talked about last time, um, but and this is going to be controversial for some men, guys, you got to get off the stupid video games. You just do, because that that comes
You
back to.
spoke blasphemy.
I know, right? I mean, video games to me, and this is going to date me, was Space Invaders and Asteroids, right?
I
um,
totally got you. Yeah.
yeah, but it comes back to dopamine, and dopamine. That's just honestly that is could be and probably is the subject of entire books. Definitely a chapter in my book. I've got notes and stuff. But the point I'm leading to is what you put into the machine affects what comes out of the machine. Okay. And you mentioned football. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. Sports in general. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there are things that men do and women do that are they're destroying them from the inside out, and perhaps they don't realize it.
Hmm.
Don't want to get too controversial, but unfortunately, pornography is one of those things as well. The mainstreaming of pornography is just, it's staggering, it's wrong, and it's destroying as you skew younger and younger among
Hmm.
men and boys. It's destroying them and giving them horrible ideas about male female relationships. And again, that comes back to dopamine.
Can you just hint to that just a little bit? Like what's in your notes? Help us understand that perspective.
Okay, everything, not everything, a lot of things in our modern world, like every time you look at your phone and check to see if somebody's commented on your Facebook post, okay, that's a dopamine hit. All right.
Feels good.
Yeah, yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And the more you do that, the more you need that, which is
Hmm.
why TikTok, in terms of people who study the human brain and those kinds of things, that's why TikTok is considered so detrimental and controversial, because it's just those little blasts of dopamine. And basically, the more you get it, the more you need it.
Hmm.
All right. Video games are the same way. The violent video games, again, there are a lot of people a lot smarter than me who are studying and have studied what that does to the human brain. But I'll just summarize it by saying nothing good. Nothing good.
Well, that was
There,
easy enough. I mean, I don't have to
right.
study anything. But yeah, and a lot of it is because it's very graphic. So, when you talk about playing asteroids and Space Invaders,
Yeah.
we see blocks, literally blocks of things. Um,
Yes.
Today you can re-image the human body in a video game, and death and carnage, whether it be intentional or not, is very realistic, especially to the brain because it's very visual.
It's very realistic. I've had the opportunity quite recently, actually, to see some of the quote unquote modern video games, and it's like, Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
and we could talk a lot about the desensitizing to violence that's happening, and again, you talk about those things, and as you go younger and younger and younger, and these boys and girls too are growing up with this stuff, what's happening to them?
Hmm.
You know, the good news is that, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, but other people might not be, is that you can rewire those neural pathways. Our brains are making new neural pathways all the time. So you can do dopamine resets. You can do positive things to kind of wean yourself off of
Hmm.
those. And in particular, and again, I don't want to go too far down this path. In particular, pornography. You can get off of that, and it takes some time, but you can get beyond wanting to have that kind of hit.
So with the limited time that we have remaining for this conversation, who specifically is your audience for your book and your talks? Because you've mentioned that you're having conversations with the woman in
Right.
men's lives. So is your audience for women, or are you really trying to reach the men 18 to 35 and say, hey, there's a better life out there for you, if only?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I'm definitely open to talking with any audience. My actual target is men of approximate age of 30 to 45 because that I believe is the men who are being affected the most about everything that we've talked about. What's happened to them generationally in terms of them not being valued and or put down. Excuse me. Certainly in terms of all the dopamine stuff, the video games and those things. So that's generally my audience. I'm not saying I wouldn't speak to younger or older audiences, but that's my sweet spot.
As we close, one more time, the name of your book
Reclaiming masculinity: How to be a man in the 21st century.
and when is it going to be done?
Shooting for August.
All
Shooting
right.
for
And that's
August. Yeah.
August of 2023.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jerry, thank you so much for this conversation and for joining me on the Question Guy podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it.